Number 10. Creating bonds. What good is creating bonds between other people? I mean, I guess it could help you in a fight where you could create a loving bond between, let's say, two enemies, thereby resolving a fight because now those two people don't hate each other, they love each other. But imagine how upset people are going to be when they find out that you manipulated them. I know Star Fox, aka Eros, the brother of Thanos, Eternal of Titan and former Avenger, has had to deal with some ire from those whom he tried to help by creating bonds between them, namely She-Hulk and Man-Wolf, which are two characters that you do not want to have mad at you, especially She-Hulk. Number 9. Visor required. Optic Blast has to be one of the worst powers out there when it comes to those I would never want to have myself. Why is this? Because for the most part Cyclops can't even control his Optic Blast alone. Well, he is a trigonometry master, and this allows him to very precisely use his abilities, which shows off his skill when it comes to utilizing them in battle. He still needs equipment to even be able to utilize them properly. Generally, Cyclops uses a visor, which he can control thanks to tiny little buttons in his gloves. However, without this or his ruby quartz glasses, Scott pretty much just needs to keep his eyes closed or risk causing a lot of possibly unintentional destruction and chaos. For a long time, Scott couldn't even work up the courage to share with Jean his feelings for her because he felt his mutant powers made him too much of a danger. So that just goes to show you how detrimental those powers can sometimes be. Number 8. Squirrel powers. While I love Doreen Green and definitely would love a chance at playing her in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel call me, were she to ever join the MCU of course, I also feel like having her powers in real life may be less desirable than how they're presented in the comics. Okay, so Doreen can communicate with squirrels. Awesome if you're joined by your furry friends in a battle, or if you perhaps need to scour the city for a lost item, which I've seen her do before to great success, or heard her do before to great success. But not so great when you happen to run into one lone squirrel at the park while out with friends and, you know, just start striking up a casual conversation. Most people are going to think you are completely out of your mind. Of course, Squirrel Girl is also supposed to resemble a squirrel with her big bushy tail and buck teeth, but even then, having her physical mutations would maybe make people less inclined to think that you were crazy when you talk to squirrels, but you would have to get all your clothes pretty much tailored to accommodate, you know, your giant tail. I always loved giant tails, but then I'm like, you know what? Having that would be probably kind of impractical for clothing. So either way, there's a bit of a downside to having Squirrel Girl's power set. Number 7. Like a rock. In many ways, this is actually a power that could save your life, and I'm sure for Ben Grimm is a power that has saved his life multiple times over. However, that doesn't mean that having rock skin is the best thing ever. In fact, there are a lot of downsides, and I'd honestly say probably more downsides than upsides, in my mind anyways. For many years, as a result of this very dramatic shift in his molecular makeup, Ben has constantly expressed how depressed he is. There have been moments when Ben has expressed an interest in permanently ending his life. Fortunately, he keeps those he loves close, and they have definitely helped to bolster his spirits over the years. He even recently got married to the love of his life, Alicia Masters. But even then, he can only live with her as a human for one day each year. Now, that can't be easy. Number 6. I know too much. Possibly one of the worst superpowers out there would be telepathy. While I do think psionic powers are super cool, this is actually one I never really want to have. We're talking about one of the most knowledge-focused powers out there. Telepathy. Telepathy is a power that many superheroes are well known for, including Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, who has used his telepathy powers before to communicate with marine life, Jean Grey, Emma Frost, and Professor X. The idea of being able to simply look into someone's mind to find answers you seek, or simply to know what they're feeling, is honestly pretty cool. However, the ability also brings into play a bunch of moral questions regarding privacy and consent usually. Personally, I would not want to know everything anyone around me is thinking. It's already sometimes I feel like hard enough being in my own head. I can't imagine what it would be like to, you know, be able to casually tune into someone else's head, or even worse, to be bombarded by other people's thoughts if, you know, you didn't have enough control over your abilities, which I believe at one point happened to Professor X, so I mean it can happen to you if you have telepathy. You could get overwhelmed. Number 5. Making ice cream. Yep, We're talking about the mutant known as Soft Serve. I'm sorry to make so much of this list mutant focused, but at the end of the day, they do have some of the weirdest and in some cases most horrifying powers, so we're talking about some of them. And I know there's probably a few that I haven't mentioned that you're like, oh, but what about this one? There's so many good ones for mutants. Anyways, leave me your favorite worst mutant power down in the comments that would ruin your life. Soft Serve's mutant abilities allow her to basically poop ice cream. She can apparently create almost any flavor and controls which flavor she makes. I feel like there is a lot of potential here for you to get addicted to your own excrement, and for that, I'm ranking this one a little bit higher on this list because that sounds like it would be pretty awkward and terrible. Probably would ruin your life. You'd end up on like one of those reality shows. But you'd be like, but it's fine because my poop is ice cream, so isn't that fine? People would be like, I still think it's weird. No, I still think it's weird. Number 4. Falling to pieces. There are only a few instances where this power is actually useful, and I don't even really know what those instances might be. But given the limitless possibilities of what can happen both in the real world and in the fictional world especially, I'm sure at some point these powers could be useful. But I can't think of an example of how exactly, which is why I'm ranking this one so high up on the list. We're talking about the powers of Arm Fall Off Boy, who basically has detachable limbs. How is this helpful? In most cases, it isn't. And what happens if you accidentally plorp one of your arms off and you can't slurp it back on again? That's really awkward. Just walking around like carrying your arm like, hey, I just can't get this one back on, so how's it going? Number 3. Nothing but Tums. If I had this power set, I'd constantly be making sure my stomach was always as calm as possible. That's right, we're talking about Zeitgeist's powers of acid vomit. Even for Zeitgeist himself, his powers were considered to be less than ideal. When they first manifested, Zeitgeist was only a teenager out on his first ever romantic excursion with a girl who he struggles in the present day to remember the name of. It was during their very first kiss that his powers manifested, causing him to vomit acid onto her face, permanently scarring her apparently. This event was so traumatic, it isn't until Zeitgeist lays on his deathbed that he is finally able to remember her name. That's how much it haunted him. I wouldn't want to have to constantly worry about accidentally disfiguring someone with my vomit, and I wouldn't ever want to have to worry about having to constantly renovate and replace basically my entire bathroom or furniture if I, had a sudden upchuck that was unexpected. Never mind the fact that it's a lot of work, but that would also be pretty expensive, so either way this seems like a pretty terrible one. Number 2. Out of time. While bending time to your will sounds pretty awesome as a power and super useful in a fight, the reality is that once again having this power would be amazing, but of course, like many others on this list, we have to consider the issue of you not having control over it, which has happened before, which is why I'm bringing it up. In this case, I'm taking a closer look at Tempest. Tempest is currently a member of the Five on Krakoa, one of Marvel's most famous and celebrated mutant groups, and one of now their most famous and celebrated mutants because she's part of it. However, while Eva Bell has pretty good control over her powers right now, she wasn't always so fortunate, and as a result actually created a lot of pain for herself. She accidentally displaced herself in time and then ended up struggling to get back home. Giving up, she kind of settled down, trained, grew up, even started having a family. However, one day she then accidentally moved through time again and ended up losing this family completely, wiped from existence. That's just a reality of what you might go through if your powers allow you to mess with time. So maybe don't have those powers. Sounds like you're gonna mess up your whole life. Number 1. Unlimited eggs. It's not so much what this power allows you to do that I think is not ideal, although that is just straight up weird in this instance. It's more about the position having this power puts you in. For this point on the list, we're talking about another member of the Five who currently has it pretty bad, unlike Tempest. I mean, Tempest, likely had it worse overall, I'd say, but that was in the past. Tempest right now is doing pretty good, I think. Egg has it bad in the present. Formerly known as Gold Balls, Egg's powers allow him to create, infertile eggs. These eggs can be used to resurrect those who have died, who are seeded within the egg and then basically are grown at an accelerated rate and then given the memories of the version of them that died. They're kind of like creating clones in a pod that you can give powers to. Considering that Egg can basically make a ton of these eggs for people to use later, this means he tends to be the one who is most often sacrificed on the team when needed. He's like one of the people that they're like, well, we can kind of afford to lose Egg and then we can just resurrect him later because he makes the eggs. So you basically just have to accept you're probably going to be the person to die all the time.
Number 10. Gambit. Remy LeBeau is a powerful and popular member of the X-Men, with the ability to tap into an item's potential kinetic energy, making it a dangerous and explosive weapon. He often uses smaller items, like a deck of playing cards, which he will then throw at his enemies. The only real limit on these powers is that he needs to make direct skin contact with whatever item he's charging, hence the cool fingerless gloves, and the amount of time it takes him to charge the object, with larger objects taking longer. He also has the ability to hypnotically charm people, making them more likely to do what he wants. Before he was a member of the X-Men though, he was a master thief, but he found that he was having trouble controlling his powers, and was worried that he might potentially harm other people. This caused him to seek out the help of Mr. Sinister, who gave Gambit a surgery, removing part of his brain in order to dampen his powers and make them more manageable. Number 9. Captain Atom. Captain Atom was originally a Charlton Comics character, the same way that the Blue Beetle used to be. DC Comics eventually purchased Charlton's collection of heroes, and as a result, he was introduced into the DC universe. In the DC retelling of his origin, Nathaniel Atom was a man sentenced to death for treason. He was offered the opportunity to instead sign up for an experiment designed to test the structural integrity of an alien metal. To test this, they placed Atom in a metal cage and then blasted it with a nuclear explosion. He was vaporized, but much like the Watchmen character he inspired, Dr. Manhattan, he was reformed with the metal now covering his skin. Captain Atom can tap into the quantum field and convert the energy into powerful blasts. He can also generate and manipulate matter, such as when he transformed Green Arrow's arrows into butterflies. Captain Atom has to be very careful with his powers though, as he is essentially a walking nuke. When he uses his upper power levels, he will start to leak radiation, and if his metal skin is ruptured, he risks detonating like an atomic bomb and destroying whatever city he's in. Number 8. Radius. Jared Corbo is a mutant who was raised with his half-brother Adrian in the East Ontario town of Orlew, at an orphanage called Hull House, or as the orphans nicknamed it, Hell House. Unbeknownst to most of the residents, Hull House was actually being operated by the Canadian superhero agency known as Department H, as a way to find and recruit members for their various superhero teams, such as Alpha Flight. Sometimes they waited until the orphans were of age, and sometimes they would have them adopted by the department so that they could participate while being underage. Which sounds bad, but when you think about it, isn't that different from what Professor X is doing. Jared's mutant powers allow him to create a force field, which he is incapable of shutting off. While this protects him from harm, it also means that he can't touch or be touched by others, and is even unable to effectively shower, and can't eat without wearing a special eating filter which converts the food to a form that can get through the field, allowing Jared to get the necessary nutrients he needs to survive. Number 7. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is thousands of years old and is the sister of Genesis, who is the wife of Apocalypse. She is a hardened warrior who respects power and strength, like the other mutants of Arakko, and her powers reflect this. Iska's power is tychokinesis, which is the power over luck and probability. But specifically, her power means that she cannot lose, or the better way to say it is that she always wins. This includes one-on-one contests, votes, and wagers, but also larger battles where she is a member of a team or army. In contests of skill, her power, including some limited shapeshifting, gives her the talents she needs to win, or she might just win through improbable circumstances. So far it sounds pretty good. Always winning is so good it just sounds like ridiculous and lazy writing. But it also means that in larger battles or wars, her powers weigh the probability of the two sides and make her defect from the losing side and join the winning side, even if the losing side was composed of those she truly cared about. Meaning that even though she still technically won, she betrayed her closest friends and allies. So she has a great power, but no control at all on how it manifests. Number 6. Black Bolt. Blackagar Boltigan made his first appearance in Fantastic Four number 45. He is the Inhuman King, who when exposed to the mutagenic Terrigen Mist was granted power of an incredible level. even for an Inhuman. His power comes from his voice, with even the smallest whisper being capable of rocking a battleship. This power was discovered when he was just a baby, and in order to protect his community, he was kept away from society until he was 19, in order for him to try and learn to control his powers. When finally let into society, he saw a Kree warship which he brought down with his voice. Unfortunately, the ship landed on the local government officials, including his parents, and he accidentally became the leader of the Inhumans at age 20. He is really good at not speaking now, as he knows all too well how little control he has over his powers and their effects on others. Number 5. Radioactive Man. Not to be confused with the Simpsons superhero whose goggles do nothing, or with the DC Comics villain, we are talking about the Marvel hero known as Radioactive Man. Making his debut in Journey into Mystery number 3 in 1963, Chen Lu is a nuclear physicist who exposed himself to small amounts of radiation at a time until he was able to build up a powerful immunity to it, as well as the ability to manipulate it to his benefit. However, he is unable to stop being radioactive, and therefore he can't be around anyone without giving them radiation sickness. He's able to mitigate this to an extent with the use of a containment suit, but this only works for a limited amount of time. This was a constant issue for the character, but later issues later retconned his abilities so he was able to have greater control of his powers, allowing him to not give all of his friends cancer. Number 4. Rogue. Anna Marie first appeared in Avengers Annual number 10. She was raised in a hippie commune in Mississippi with her close friend Cody Robbins. One day, Cody decided that it was time to shoot his shot with Anna Marie. Proving that the whole "the worst she could do is say no" thing is a bit inaccurate, when Cody and Anna made direct skin contact, her mutant powers drained him of his life force, leaving him in a permanent coma. She eventually found a way to make this power work for good when she joined the X-Men, and she got more powers once she made contact with Carol Danvers. But overall, Rogue is unable to control her draining powers and is forced to wear gloves at all times in order to avoid making direct contact with anyone who she could accidentally hurt. Number 3. Friendly Fire. Friendly Fire is a member of Section 8 who has the ability to shoot powerful energy blasts out of his hands that deal devastating damage. Unfortunately, as his name suggests, he is totally incapable of hitting what he is aiming at, and instead always ends up hitting his teammates. This has led to a couple of deaths of Section 8 members, but the worst death has got to be the one that occurred when the team went up against the mini-angled ones. These strange visitors attacked the team, easily dispatching team members like Jean de Baton and Dog Welder. Friendly Fire realized that it was up to him, and he had to come through for his friends. As he put it, "I gotta do it. Just this once. Gotta hit what I'm aiming at. Can't let my buddies down. Must hold the power." He unleashed the full force of his blast and blew his own head off, barely being able to utter the word crap before dying. Number 2. Infectious Lass. First appearing in Superboy number 201, Drura Sept from the planet Somatur is part of an alien race whose bodies play host to a variety of different microorganisms. The people of her planet are able to play host to these bacteria without suffering any ill effects, but they were able to infect the people around her. This sounds like it could have some potential for a superhero power, the ability to unleash germ warfare on your enemies. But unfortunately, Infectious Lass is unable to control who she infects, and is just as likely to infect any of her allies as she is her enemies. She tried out for the Legion of Superheroes, but was denied membership as she was deemed more of a risk to the Legion members than an asset. Number 1. The Hulk. When Bruce Banner was accidentally caught in the blast radius of his experimental gamma bomb, he underwent a startling metamorphosis. Whenever he becomes angry or outraged, he transforms into the Hulk. The Hulk is of course a giant green rage monster who is prone to going on rampages and smashing things. Hulk is viewed as a monster by society, and by extension, so is Banner. Banner has to make constant efforts to control the beast within, But since it would be a boring comic if the Hulk never came out, Bruce constantly loses control and unleashes the Incredible Hulk onto the world. Number 10. Tattooed Man. Mark Richards was a former Marine who was presumed dead before showing up in Gotham as a killer for hire with the ability to make his tattoos come to life as projections, which then attack his enemies. He explains his powers as being due to a magic process called sin grafting, which takes the sins of his victims and makes them into tattoo monsters. Now, that's comic booky and fun, but that's also incredibly vague. Why are sins turning into tattoos? Which sins are worth a tattoo monster? I don't know, it's just weird to me that none of the heroes or villains he comes across ever seem to ask any follow-up questions. Number 9. The Fisherman. Fisherman is an Aquaman villain who often works as a smuggler, running weapons to Atlantean rebels and using trained dolphins to run drugs into France. He uses a large fishing pole with super strong fishing line to attack and tie up his enemies, as well as a series of specialized lures that blow up or shoot gases at his enemies. Dumb, but pretty straightforward. What makes him so confusing is that it has since been revealed that his helmet is actually a sentient parasite that takes over their host's mind and makes them commit fishing-related crimes. Kind of like if Venom was a retired dad. What I don't get about this is why would a parasite give its host the ability to be good at fishing? Was the parasite formed in a Bass Pro Shop? Backstory and the theme of this villain just do not match. In case you're thinking, maybe it was the host's idea to go with the hobbyist theme. Each time the parasite has bonded with a new host, that person has also taken on the identity of the fisherman. So it is the parasite's choice to continue with the fisherman theme. Number 8. Swarm. Fritz von Meyer was a Nazi scientist who came across an irradiated beehive and began experimenting on the bees, hoping that he would be able to control them to do his bidding. The experiment went wrong and the bees turned on him, devouring Fritz. As he was eaten by the bees, his consciousness was spread between all the bees in the hive. So he was granted control of the bees, but at a weird, twisty cost. He uses this ability to control bees, to form them into a body-like shape, and tries to cleanse the earth of all humans. He can also form other shapes out of bees and use them to attack people. I don't get it. I mean, radioactive or not, why would getting eaten by bees, who only eat pollen by the way, cause you to become a hive mind? Look, he's a very visually interesting villain, but he raises a lot more questions than he answers. Number 7. Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a fifth-dimensional being who has developed an obsession with Superman, and he likes to spend his time harassing the Man of Steel and putting him through various ordeals for his own amusement. He can fly, teleport, and create essentially anything he likes just with a thought. He's also a character with cosmic awareness, sometimes speaking directly to the reader as though he's aware of his place in a comic book. A lot of his powers are explained by saying that he can manipulate reality. However, what's weird is his weakness is that if someone tricks him into saying his name backwards, he's forced to return to the 5th dimension for 90 days and undo any damage that he caused. Look, if he can do what he wants, why does that work? This is a creature that can bend reality to his will, yet he's repeatedly brought down by saying a word. Is this self-imposed? Is he just trying to be a good sport? Neither would surprise me, but the only thing I know for sure about Mr. Mxyzptlk is that nothing he does really makes sense. That's kind of the point. Number 6. Polka Dot Man. Although he doesn't technically have superpowers, this villain's gimmick is too confusing not to get into. Polka Dot Man commits crimes by tearing off the various colored dots on his costume, throwing them, and then letting them expand and morph into the various gadgets that he needs. For example, he can tear a dot off, transform it into a buzzsaw blade, and throw it at Batman and Robin as he escapes on a flying saucer, as he does in his first appearance in Detective Comics number 300. Well, I can suspend my belief when I see Batman pull whatever he needs out of his utility belt. The idea of Polka Dot Man being able to carry around full vehicles on his costume is just too much. What makes it even more confusing is we've never received any explanation for how this works. His origin and powers were altered and frankly improved in the live-action adaptation of The Suicide Squad, where it was revealed that his mother had been a scientist at Star Labs who had exposed him to an alien virus in an attempt to give him superpowers. This resulted in him being able to cast glowing colored dots that destroyed whatever they came into contact with. Number 5. Video Man. Video Man first appeared in Spider-Man Family featuring Amazing Friends #1. He is a giant, two-dimensional, 8-bit creature that only yells video game phrases like "Destroy all combatants!" He can shoot energy blasts from his arms that can blow up whatever they hit, which I can get on board with, but what makes him so confusing is that we're given zero context or explanation as to who or what he is or where he comes from. He just shows up and attacks Spider-Man and Iceman. At first I thought maybe he'd actually escape from an arcade game, but once he's destroyed, the heroes discover an internal processor unit, which implies that he was created by someone and designed for the purpose of destruction. But who created him? More importantly, how did they create him? Will we ever find out in another appearance? No, because he never showed up again. #4, Hammerhead. Former mob hitman who was critically injured on a job gone wrong. Hammerhead was taken into surgery and given a steel alloy plate, which gave his head its distinctive odd appearance. Although this barely qualifies as a power, he is known to attack his enemies by literally charging headfirst into them. He regularly smashes his head into walls and takes blows to the head from Spider-Man, seemingly brushing them off due to the metal plate on his head. This makes no sense if you know anything about how concussions work. In extremely basic terms, a concussion is caused when your head gets hit and your brain bangs against the inside of your skull, thus damaging your brain. So, even if the steel plate prevents Hammerhead's skull from breaking, the sudden shock of smashing into a wall or taking a punch from a superhero with the proportionate strength of a spider would still cause him severe brain damage. It's why football players get concussions despite wearing helmets. Even once Hammerhead's brain was transferred into an adamantium skeleton by Mr. Negative, this same weakness would remain, as unlike vibranium, adamantium does not absorb the force of a blow. #3, Ruby Thursday. For some reason, Thursday Rubenstein thought it would be a good idea to replace her head with a red orb that can reshape itself into dangerous tentacles and spikes. She used these abilities to fight the Defenders as a member of the head-themed supervillain group known as the Headmen. Other abilities of the big red candy apple she calls a head are the ability to fire energy blasts and explode and reform. When concentrating really hard, she can also make the head take the form of a normal red-headed woman. Now, clearly nothing about Ruby Thursday makes sense, but this is the thing that really makes me scratch my head. Why is it harder for her to make the orb look like a head than it is for her to make it explode and reform? Come to think of it, why didn't she just make the head look normal to begin with? #2, Bizarro. A Superman villain with several different origins, sometimes being a clone, sometimes being from an alternate dimension, and sometimes being a duplicate created by the Joker when he had the ability to alter reality. Bizarro's deal is that he's the opposite of Superman in every way, including his speech. For example, if he was hungry, he would express this by saying something like, "Bizarro am full and no want pizza." He has superpowers, but in true Bizarro fashion, they manifest themselves as backwards versions of Superman's. So instead of heat vision and Arctic breath, Bizarro shoots ice beams out of his eyes and blows fire. What makes Bizarro's powers so confusing is the inconsistency that comes with them. His whole gimmick is supposed to be that he has the opposite powers of Superman, yet unlike Superman, he still has super strength and speed. You might think that I'm reading too much into this, but in All-Star Superman #8, when Superman visits the Bizarro world, he sees a Bizarro version of the Flash who boasts that he has a top speed of 2 inches per hour. So, by this logic, Bizarro should be weak and unable to fly, yet he still manages to consistently hold his own in fights with Superman. As Bizarro would put it, that makes perfect sense. #1, Kangaroo. When he was a child, Frank Oliver was obsessed with kangaroos. He would study them from a distance and even spent time living among them so that he could learn to mimic their abilities. When he grew up, he became a criminal who used his jumping abilities to commit robberies and then leap away like a kangaroo. Although he was later given augmentations that heightened his abilities, in his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man #81, he's just a normal human who can jump like a kangaroo. That's a bit far-fetched, even for a comic book. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he studied kangaroos so well that he learned to jump just as well as them. It still doesn't add up. Let's crunch some numbers. A kangaroo can leap a distance of about 25 feet, which is undeniably impressive. Now, the long jump world record is around 29 feet, so it is conceivable that a human could accomplish that. However, The maximum height a kangaroo can jump is 6 feet, yet in his first appearance, we see Frank consistently and easily leaping at least 15 feet high. For reference, the current high jump world record is just over 8 feet. That would be impossible for a kangaroo, let alone some regular Australian dude.
Coming in at number 10 is Iska the Unbeaten. This spot could as easily been taken by Domino, as Iska also has a form of limited psychokinesis, which is probability manipulation, or also known as the power of luck, which is probably one of the most unexplainable powers because we can't even say that luck is for sure a real thing. But Iska takes it one step further into ridiculousness with the power of being literally unable to lose. Iska has the power to always win, no matter what, whether that is individual one-on-one contests, votes, or wagers, or larger battles where she is a member of a group. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talent she needs to win, or she might just win through, quote, improbable circumstances. In larger battles or wars, her powers detect the probability of both sides winning and have literally led her to defect from the losing side and join the winning side, meaning she still personally wins. It's not that we don't understand it, it's that it can't even properly be explained without sounding utterly ridiculous. Love Iska the Unbeaten though, great character. Number 9, Rainbow Girl. She is the first superpowered individual on this list affiliated with the Legion of Superheroes, but she definitely won't be the last. The team seems to be just a sticky flytrap for all the random and wacky superheroes out there in the universe. Unlike some others though, Rainbow Girl didn't actually make it onto that team as her powers were deemed not useful enough. Instead, she made it onto the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which I'm assuming is the Legion that villains either don't listen to, or the Legion that just puts on a movie for villains to watch instead of just teaching them. I mean, fighting them. Anyways, why is Rainbow Girl useless? Well, she can harness the emotional spectrum. Red for rage, orange for green, yellow for fear, green for will, blue for hope, indigo for compassion, and violet for love. But unlike the lanterns, she has no ring to use the power through, and she cycles through the colors impulsively, meaning it leads to terrible mood swings. Number 8, Legion. David Haller was living in Paris with his mother when her home was invaded by a assassination team. They took out David's stepfather before his eyes, which kicked off his latent psionic powers, which he used to incinerate the brains out of the assassins. However, as he did so, he made telepathic contact with each of his victims, thus experiencing their thoughts and emotions as they died, which, as you can imagine, deeply affected David, forcing him into a catatonic state. The consciousness of the leader of the assassins, Jamail Karami, was absorbed and merged into David's mind. The terrible trauma that David had suffered had splintered David's personality into multiple alters, with each of these alters controlling a different psionic power. Because of this, Legion is an Omega level mutant able to create spontaneous mutations of different kinds that are accompanied by new personas or alter egos to govern each one of these new mutations. Now, David himself stated that he had in his mind 200 Omega level split personalities, but the X-Men Rogue stated that while she was inside Legion, she was connected to thousands of types of powers, and there were more, quote, being born all the time. How this works, I have absolutely no idea, but it does, and he is scary. Number 7, Matter Eater Lad. Honestly, Tensel Chem's power, one shared by his whole race, gives me more questions than it gives me answers. Matter Eater Lad's main shtick is that he can eat any substance of matter in any form, solid, liquid, or gas, in any amount at super speed. Bismalians, which are his race, come from a planet where over time microbes made regular food inedible. In turn, their species evolved to be able to eat any form of matter thanks to producing a variety of digestive enzymes that act on specific substances, making them easier to chew and digest. Bismalians can also metabolize food almost instantly, and if they gotta, they can consume tons of food in minutes. So where I am left confused is exactly where all that stuff goes. Not to get too into it here, but what's Tensel's bathroom situation like? Also dental. I'm assuming their teeth are of a denser material than human teeth. One Bismalian who was part of the Yellow Lanterns ate people, which caused him to get his teeth removed as punishment, but he then had those replaced with Bismalian steel, allowing him to bite through almost anything. So my question is, could he not bite through anything before? Also, if Tensel eats a whole asteroid, which he has done before, where does he poop? I just have so many questions and like no answers. I would just one answer. Number 6, the Flash. Wally West is easily the fastest of all the speedsters out there. He has an almost spiritual connection to the Speed Force that allows him to do a great number of things, from traveling time to creating electrical energy constructs. Thanks to a heart condition, Wally has even been able to freeze time, which basically allows him to move at super speed without actually moving at super speed. And if you can explain exactly how that works to me, I will give you $1 single. That's all I got. The Speed Force is basically time, the representation of reality in motion, being the very cosmic force that pushes space and time forward. So how is it that people can hold chunks of it, or create lightning constructs with it, or absorb speed and momentum from other people or things? As a concept for time and a cosmic force, it is really hard to both wrap your head around it and explain the Speed Force and all the things that speedsters like Wally West and Barry Allen are able to do with it. You kind of just have to accept that this is what it is. Number 5, the Hulk. Everyone knows Hulk's ability to turn into a big old green monster and rip things apart with a strength that increases based on his anger. But what many of you may not know is that Hulk actually possesses a much more subtle ability to see astral projections and ghosts and even interact with them if he chooses. Hulk's astral form perception has come in handy when working with Doctor Strange as a defender. But why does Hulk have this ability? Well, Bruce Banner subconsciously feared his father's ghost would come back to haunt him, like literally come back to haunt him. And so the Hulk just developed this mechanism to allow him to look out for that ghost, and I guess other ghosts as well. There isn't really more to it. Hulk just developed the ability that is something usually reserved for telepaths. For the super intelligent Bruce Banner, it would make a bit more sense, but it's been suggested that for Bruce, the clarity of the astral forms is diminished when compared to the telepathically resistant Hulk's ability to view them. With Immortal Hulk and the connection to the One Below All, perhaps that could serve as some kind of fan explanation, but we don't have a real one, so no. Number 4, Gin Genie. Gin Genie was a mutant, but unlike almost any other mutant ever, her powers were directly dependent on how much alcohol she consumed. Becca Parker had the power to generate seismic vibrations proportionate to her amount of alcoholic intake. As you can imagine, being intoxicated in order to use your superpowers can be rather interesting. It seems like one of those things you should add to the list of things you shouldn't do while under the influence. Like, don't drive, don't operate heavy machinery, don't use your superpowers to cause seismic vibrations. That kind of thing. Unfortunately, we do not get to see her use her powers that much, or get an explanation for why alcohol fuels said powers, because Gin Genie is de-lifed in the same comic that she was introduced in. X-Force number 116 in July 2001. Number 3, Superman. Back in the day, while Superman was a fairly new being, he would kind of have whatever superpower he wanted / needed at the time, until eventually his set table of powers was established. But there is one new power that appeared in 1958, Superman number 125, where Superman learned to fire a tiny version of himself out of his hands. After discovering a tiny spaceship that blows up in his face, Superman loses all of his abilities minus, interestingly, his invulnerability. Luckily, he gained the ability to literally fire a doll-sized version of himself out of his hand that had all of his powers and would go and beat up criminals or melt icebergs. What's hilarious is that Superman even got jealous of the little mini him. When a guided missile was on its way to the Eiffel Tower, he sent out his little buddy and an onlooker shouted, "How cute!" To which he said, "Cute? What nonsense!" Fortunately for Superman, his mini-me was destroyed by a kryptonite meteorite and Superman's powers were restored to him. Number 2, Color Kid. Ulu Vac from the planet Lupra is the hero known as Color Kid, and his name does indeed suit his abilities. Vac was struck by a multicolored beam of light from another dimension that granted him the incredible power to alter the color of objects and people, and that is literally all he can do. It's stated that this power is probably caused by him changing the spectrum of light around the person or thing, but there are no real explanations given. It also does absolutely nothing for him or anyone else. Color Kid decided to use this power to go and audition to be a member of the Legion of Superheroes, and what do you know, he was rejected from the team and his powers were deemed useless. While it may be true, it feels a little bit mean, but at least he got in with the Legion of Substitute Heroes, so there's that. And in at number 1 is El Guapo. Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe. But that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions because Robbie doesn't seem to have any powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with his flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as a idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually has total control over his skateboard. But the problem with that statement is that his skateboard also acted with a mind of its own, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps it's his own subconsciousness beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true or even explain his ability at all, really. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. I don't know, you tell me what you think.
Number 10, Luktuka the Knower. Luktuka is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Luktuka in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arako who sit on the Great Ring, Luktuka resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool. Luktuka's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone like you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, no, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Luktuka's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9, Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, "Hello, you don't have to do this. I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself." The dude operating the mech understands him, since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8, Manifold. If you thought Luktuka was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Luktuka being newer, you may already know of Manifold, because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kind of confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vesi's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking.
Number 7, Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Araco, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes they also force her to always win, like against her will, and then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5, Tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the Pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability, like how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So.
Number 4, Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is a creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3, Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kind of leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and like no answers.
Number 2, Ice Cream. Ice Cream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're, you know, usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Ice Cream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X-Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Ice Cream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kinda succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Ice Cream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? I have to know.
Number 1. El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it.
Number 10. Exceptional. Bailey Hoskins is known for being the worst X-Men ever, probably because his powers are pretty lackluster sounding, but managed to pack a pretty big bang when they do get used. Bailey's powers involve self-detonation, but the only thing is that activating his powers will actually also result in his death, meaning he can only use them once and doing so will kill him. However, he does end up doing this, and in doing so saves the world, or at least a world. His good friend and teammate Miranda has reality warping powers that are extremely powerful, propelling her into her own classification of mutant even, in terms of power level. But even then, this time around, it seems Miranda can't seem to interfere in this world at this time. It seems she needs some help from Bailey, and in sacrificing himself, he not only saves the world, but also seemingly helps Miranda to fix it and set it right again. Or potentially erase it. That's kind of what it looks like happens at the end. But maybe that's how you fix it. Just wipe it. Number 9. Funny Man. Funny Man is an odd superhero who is historically actually pretty significant, despite how weird he may seem. He's not just powerful for how much of a goofball he is powerful in a historical context, which I think means he deserves this spot. Also, I'm not sure if we've ever mentioned him on the channel. As far as I can recall, I haven't at the very least. Funny Man was a creation of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, after they both left DC and began what would become an epic and long-time legal dispute over the rights to Superman, not feeling they were being fairly paid their dues. And for those who don't know, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster are the ones that created Superman. Siegel especially was passionate about getting the rights to their character back. After leaving DC, they reconnected with former DC editor Vin Sullivan, who had started up his own comic book company, Magazine Enterprises. Jerry and Joe tried to create the magic of Superman again, but this time by teaming up to make something entirely different and new: Funny Man. Celebrating their love of comic book pranks and humor, Funny Man was comedian Larry Davis, who after a publicity stunt gone wrong, ends up actually catching a real-life criminal, and decides to become a bona fide superhero, using his jokes and funny pranks to apprehend and stop criminals. A wacky idea that sadly did not end up panning out in the end for Jerry and Joe, as the character only lasted 6 issues. Funny Man didn't have any powers, but he was miraculously and comically good at stopping villains with his antics, and sometimes even doing this completely by accident. Number 8. Dead Girl. I think one of the weirdest things about Dead Girl is that her whole thing is immortality, as she's already dead and basically can't die, with her mutant powers activating only after her death. And yet she did die in the comics, possibly due to a disease which ultimately caused her to fall apart from decomposition. That is the one thing she's meant to be good at, not dying, and yet it happened. Because she's technically already dead. Fortunately, that didn't stop Dead Girl from going on adventures, and she currently still is doing so, even despite dying. Joining the newly reformed Static X as they battle against Zeitgeist Team Excellent. Dead Girl's power allows her to reanimate herself, parts of herself, and to communicate with ghosts and even temporarily resurrect the dead. Number 7. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur make for a great pair, especially as Moon Girl's power set allows her to swap her consciousness with Devil Dinosaur's consciousness. An oddly specific but super powerful ability. Moon Girl, aka Lunella Lafayette, actually has inhuman lineage and gained her abilities after undergoing Terrigenesis. Aside from that, she is also a super genius, and despite her young age, is likely one of the most brilliant and gifted minds that we have in the Marvel Universe. Also, when we're talking about weird power sets and weird heroes who are also super powerful, Moon Girl really fits the bill, as even outside of being a superhero, she's identified as a kind of oddball her entire life. In fact, she was super nervous about undergoing Terrigenesis because of this. Although she has embraced her weirdness, she was worried that this would just be another thing that would make her stand out more and turn her into even more of a freak than she already was. Aw, Lunella. I identify a lot with Moon Girl. I feel like she's such a cool and underrated character. Number 6. Elasti Woman. Elasti Woman. I love Rita Farr. She is one of the members of DC's Doom Patrol. In the show Doom Patrol, Rita might struggle to utilize and control her powers, still afraid of them and of her appearance while using them, as well as becoming, permanently stuck in her kind of creepy elastic form that she has in the show. But in the comics, Elasti Woman has learned to master her abilities. Rita gained her powers while she, as a Hollywood actress, was working on a set in Africa. She was exposed to volcanic gas, which allowed her to change the size of her body and limbs at will, also having the ability to stretch her limbs. John Byrne's interpretation of the character was also able to alter the size of objects just by touching them. And the current Prime Earth continuity version of her also has shapeshifting abilities. I also feel like DC's Doom Patrol series does a great job of capturing what shapeshifting or stretching powers would be like in real life, and kind of the whole horror and body dysmorphia aspects of them. Possibly it's one of the best live action interpretations of this kind of power set I have ever seen. Also, if you aren't watching DC's Doom Patrol, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. It's so good. Number 5. Multiple Man. Multiple Man has a strange and yet awesome power. He can create duplicates, often referred to as dupes for short, of himself, and use them to do and learn all sorts of things. Why learn? Well, because when he absorbs these duplicates back into himself, he also gains all their memories and knowledge, as long as he gets to absorb them back, that is. We've seen a lot of weird stories with Multiple Man because of this part of his unique power set, including one where he had a baby with his girlfriend Siren, but because he had actually sent a dupe to sleep with her on the night the child was conceived, when he first went to hold their newborn child, because it was actually a product of a dupe, it got absorbed back into him. Lots of weird things about that. Well, that whole scenario. And then there was the time that he secretly sent a dupe posing as him, I mean technically they're all him, but they're not the real him, to hang out with Layla and their son together, Davy, when Davy took his first steps. This dupe tragically died during an attack on Madrox's lab in X-Corp, so he wasn't able to actually absorb him back, and therefore lost those memories forever. Ooh, sad, weird. Kinda awful, Jamie. I love when people are always like, man, Jamie, why are you always sending dupes to hang out with me? And Jamie's response is just like, I mean, technically the dupes are me, so you're just hanging out with me. Number 4. Crazy Jane. Crazy Jane is a member of the Doom Patrol, and honestly, that is a great team to look at if you want to find some superheroes who are actually quite powerful but also just wonderfully weird. Jane is no exception to that rule. She's kind of like Marvel's Legion, who appeared only a few years before she made her debut over at DC Comics, first appearing in Doom Patrol issue 19 of the 1987 series, created by comic book writing legend Grant Morrison and masterful artist Richard Case. Crazy Jane is Kay Chalice, who within her has at least 64 personalities, each with their own personas and their own power sets. While this means she has a lot of power at her fingertips, the challenging thing is that Jane often struggles to find balance with the various personalities residing within her, and has demonstrated various levels of control over them, and they over her. Number 3. Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is also one of the most ridiculous heroes when it comes to her premise and her power set. Although really what makes Squirrel Girl, aka Doreen Green, so strong of a hero, so powerful of a hero, and of a character, is her likability and her approach to heroism. She has a tendency to beat villains by befriending them and persuading them to stop their devilish and deadly plots. Although she has also summoned an army of squirrels in the past to help her take down even even some of the most famous and notorious villains, like early on in her career when she handily and embarrassingly defeated Dr. Doom. Squirrel Girl has also faced off and defeated the likes of Thanos and Galactus as well. I love Doreen Green. I want to be Doreen Green. She's so great. Number 2, Metamorpho. Probably one of the strangest but also most powerful heroes out there is Metamorpho. Metamorpho made his first appearance back in 1965 in The Brave and the Bold issue 57, and has also been known as the Element Man in comics. He has a very unique and interesting power set that allows him to transform his body or parts of his body into any element. This also gives him a pretty unique look as well. Metamorpho isn't the only hero to exhibit these powers though. At one point we also had Element Girl, whose story ended up turning quite bleak in the end, I must say. She assisted Metamorpho on some of his adventures, and maybe if we do a part 2, I will tell you some more about her on that list. Number 1, Dupe. By far the strangest, yet kinda in a weird way most OP characters of all time from Marvel has to be Dupe. Okay, so he's at the very least the most strange, even if you don't agree that he's the most OP. And now we have his evil counterpart, Pood in Excellent. Oh boy. Dupe is pretty powerful because he has some fourth wall shattering level of awareness and is able to actually move between panels in comics, existing not just within the page's panels, but also moving into the borders and margins of that page as well, which I think is pretty wild. He's also demonstrated some powerful magical abilities as well as super strength, speed, durability, and even the power to resurrect, without the help of the Five no less. Yeah, because Dupe is also like associated with mutants, even though I don't really know if we've clarified if Dupe is actually a mutant, but he's definitely mutant adjacent at least.
Number 10, 3D Man. Okay, we're gonna start this one out on a trippy note. Meet Charles Chandler. He entered Marvel Comics back in 1977 in Marvel Premiere issue 35. He's an American test pilot who got his powers from radiation after an explosion while escaping Skrulls. Now, Charlie was consumed by radiation and his brother Hal had to witness the entire thing. Super tragic. Now, the explosion imprinted an image of Charlie onto Hal's glasses. So now if Hal focuses hard enough, he can project Charlie back into existence as this man, this 3D man. Now Hal would fall into a coma when this happens, and over time the brothers would swap on who's actually controlling the 3D man. Mind you, the 3D man is 3 times stronger than the average human being, but he's also 3 times as confusing, because none of these powers should make sense in any way. Number 9, Stone Boy. Dag Wentham is not from Earth, first of all. He's actually from the planet Zwen as a member of the Legion of the Substitute Heroes. He made his DC Comics debut with Adventure Comics issue 306. He comes out of the gate hot. He comes out confident. He calls himself Stone Boy because he can turn himself into solid stone. But the Legionnaires said my power was too static and would accomplish nothing positive. Watch me change. I mean, we didn't need the last 80% of that, but they're also not wrong. Your powers are amazing, but you can't really do much. He just turns to stone. The team uses him by dropping him as a stone on the head of their enemies. That's like when you're playing Smash Bros and your friend picks Kirby and all they do is just float above and then smash down on you. You're like, really? Can we just fight? I'm that person, I'm that friend. So this ability came because his homeworld would rotate so slowly that the nights are a half of a year long. So they evolved super suspended animation. Hypnotic suggestion is the reason he can wake up, but how does any of this even happen? It's not even explained. Does it hurt? Is it itchy? Oh, it must be so itchy. Number 8, Matter Eater Lad. Matter Eater Lad, okay, he comes from the planet Bismol, not like Pepto-Bismol, which you may think it should be after reading this, where microbes made their food inedible and the population soon had to evolve or starve. Now they didn't turn into farmers, they didn't create new food, they did however gain the ability to eat any and all matter. So now we have Matter Eater Lad, aka Tenzil Kem. He was part of that same crew with Sunboy and Stoneboy, you know, that fantastic Stoneboy we just talked about. The dude introduces himself to the team when he eats an old ray gun. He even says yum yum, like he likes the taste of an old ray gun. The team actually decides to use them. They're like, okay, well he could just literally eat our way to freedom. And then even in the thought bubble, it shows him like eating a jail cell and they're like, yeah, He's not wrong. It's pretty, we could use them. And then Tenzil even says, I know what's on your mind. I'm unusual. I don't qualify. No, Tenzil, what's on our mind is where does that food go after you yum eat it? Like, I'm no doctor, but an old ray gun, that can't feel good coming out. He's like, hey guys, look how many thumbtacks I can eat. The whole team's like, no, Tenzil, wait, no. Number 7, Multiple Man. James Madrox. He made his first appearance in Giant Size Fantastic Four issue 4, and his ability you probably just know by his name. He can make duplicates. He wasn't used very much in the X-Men, and he spent most of his days with X-Factor. Now, his powers may seem weak compared to gods and wizards, but this guy makes me ask a lot of questions, because at one point, James had 40 of him. There are 40 James running around town. That's a lot of James. So the duplicates feel, think, and act independently, but they're guided by the original James. So each of these duplicates manifests one aspect of James' personality, and the longer that they're away from the OG James, the more those traits become extreme. And if one of these duplicates passed away, he can sense the general area where the body is. But there's a logic question to be asked here. Like, for example, if he eats a handful of diamonds and then multiplies into 40 James, and then all those James did the Mama Bird method and puked up those diamonds, do they all have the same contents inside their stomach? Do we just make more diamonds? If so, we may have figured out a really gross solution to a lot of problems. Number 6, Swarm. Okay, meet Fritz von Meyer. He made his debut in Champions issue 14 back in 1977. And as you could probably guess by his name, he's a swarm of bees. How terrifying is that? He's made of 1,000 bees. This goes back to that one day where he was still just a German beekeeper and he found a beehive that was unlike any other hive he had seen. So he made a device that he hoped would reawaken these bees. And originally he thought that these bees were an end result of a mutation with a nearby fallen meteorite. So he was pumped about it. These were unique bees after all, because when he tried to capture the queen bee, the others just devoured him. They ate him. There were only bones left over. But now these bees were so special because now his consciousness was spread out throughout all of these thousands of bees, and now you have the scariest villain ever. Just a man made of bees. Here, take my wallet, take my phone, whatever you want. Yeah, you're made of bees. I'm not gonna fight you. No way I'm throwing hands with 1,000 bees. Get out of town. Also, that must be extremely hard to do. I mean, he makes himself look like the shape of a human. That's extreme coordination. Number 5, Arm Fall Off Boy. He made his first appearance in Secret Origins Volume 2, Issue 46. His real name isn't even known, so now we have to call him Arm Fallout Boy. Fall Off Boy. His powers are just that. He can take his arms off and use them as weapons. Now, he tried to enlist as a member of the Legion of Superheroes, but was rejected. He was actually the first reject. Matter Eater Lad said that he got these oddly specific powers because he was careless when holding the anti-gravity metal element 152, but it's hard to tell if he was serious. His arms aren't robotic arms, like Bucky Barnes, for example. His arm can actually come off and then you can use it as a metal weapon. Sure, that's great, but it doesn't make a plorp sound, you know? So he takes his own arm off, hits people with his wet shoulder blade, and then just plorps it back on. Wouldn't it be damaged? Also, would he feel the pain as soon as he connected it back to his body and his brain? All the questions. Also, ew. Number 4, Songbird. Melissa Gold made her comic book debut in The Incredible Hulk issue 449. She ran away from her parents at a young age, and whilst developing a hard knock life attitude, she ended up becoming a professional wrestler, giving herself the stage name Screaming Mimi, and then soon joined the wrestling group Grapplers. So the Grapplers were doing great, they were killing it, but they weren't making the same amount of money as the male wrestlers. So they had to take on a new job now, with the Roxxon Oil Company. Now because of Quasar, the mission went horribly and the Grapplers were tried and jailed. Melissa was given vocal cord implants that provided her with acoustic kinesis, hence her first nickname, Screaming Mimi. She can make all these crazy weapons with her voice as well, and even has the ability to craft herself wings with her voice and fly. Somehow. She joined the Masters of Evil in Avengers issue 271, but when she could no longer use her powers, Zemo came in with his accomplice, the Fixer, and gave her new powers with neck implants. Her sound energy is pretty cool, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, she can create solid weapons and force fields, and she can even go as far as to make herself undetectable by others. Fascinating, yes. Confusing. Also yes. Number 3, Bouncing Boy. He made a spectacular arrival to Action Comics in issue 276. He's a member of that Legion of Superheroes that I keep mentioning. So yes, this guy made it through, and the dude who used his arm as a Nerf bat was rejected. What a world. Okay. So Chuck Tane was born on Earth, and he has this unique ability where he can inflate like a beach ball and bounce around. The combination of invulnerability and velocity makes him quite the unit. He got these powers by accidentally drinking a super plastic formula that he thought was soda pop. Does he have to be round? Does he have to bounce around? I feel like his powers are not really specific here. If he's strong and unstoppable, can he just inflate himself a little bit and then fight like a normal person? Like, can he make his fist into extreme sock and boppers and then boing, like they'll bounce away, then boing, and they'll bounce away. It feels a little bit better than being a beach ball than bouncing around like that chick from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That sounds like a nightmare. You get a lot more done than being the beach ball of doom, is all I'm saying. Number 2, Jin Genie. Becca Parker was one of the X-Force members. She was introduced in issue 116. Her powers don't make a lot of sense, but they're so fun and specific that I have to talk about her. So the more alcohol in her system she has, the more powerful she becomes. She probably kills it at holiday office parties, eh? Wow. She's the first one going home at like 9 p.m. You're like, really? Oh, Jin Genie, that makes sense. Jin Genie has the power to generate seismic vibrations depending on how much she drinks. Now, it's not specified how this works. Are we talking about the amount you drink or the percentages? Because this one, we could maybe find a solution in time. Finally, number 1, Animal Vegetable Mineral Man. So as crazy as his name sounds, that's just it. He made his first debut in DC Comics with Doom Patrol issue 89. Swedish scientist Sven Larsson gained these incredible powers after falling into a vat of mysterious amino acids. So now he can change any part of his body into any animal, any vegetable, or any mineral. And he can do them at the same time. It doesn't have to be one of them. It can be all of them at the same time and on different body parts. How insane and overpowered is that?
Spotlight is on Steve Larson, also known as Animal Vegetable Mineral Man. He was attacked by his secondary dinosaur head during a robbery gone wrong.
So not only does this not make any sense at all, but this is insane. This guy should never lose a fight. The possibilities are literally endless. The fact that he can somehow control all 3 at the same time as well, like your mind must be amazing.
Number 10, the Hulk. Now, Bruce Banner is the absolute poster child for not being able to control one's powers. If you're not familiar with the immense power this genius possesses, where have you been? Due to exposure to gamma radiation from the gamma bomb that he designed, he now has the ability to turn into the green giant known as the Hulk, with many of the early transformations being involuntary due to anger. Well, he does eventually strike an agreement with the Beast Within. An excellent example of that being the Hulk-Bruce hybrid we see on screen in Avengers Endgame. It wasn't always smooth sailing. Now, how much control Bruce winds up losing to the Hulk is best described as a spectrum because there are times when he completely loses himself to the Hulk-fueled rage, there are times when he retains his genius intellect, and there are instances of everything in between, really. First appearing in The Incredible Hulk #1 all the way back in 1962, the Hulk is a staple in comic book history, and I really hope one day he just gets a decent standalone movie. Number 9. Black Bolt. Now, the king of the Inhumans is a bit of a tricky one since he does have some control over his powers. He's just severely handicapped by them. Black Bolt's powers come from an organic brain implant that interacts with electrons in the air, and this implant is connected to the speech center of his brain. Now, similar to how Cyclops' powers is activated when he opens his eyes, Black Bolt's ability is activated whenever he speaks, no matter how loud he is, which leaves him effectively mute outside of battle. This has led to some major mishaps for the hero, like the time he accidentally killed his parents with the debris of a Kree ship he destroyed with his voice, or the time he fought Thanos and destroyed Attilan, which led to the release of a Terrigen mist bomb that, combined with the atmosphere, became deadly to mutants everywhere. So, although he does have control over his voice, that doesn't mean that he's able to control the sheer power of his abilities. Check him out in his first appearance, Fantastic Four #45 in 1965. Number 8, Citizen Steel. DC Comics' Nathan Haywood had a promising football career until a severe injury required him to have one of his legs amputated. Following an attack by the Fourth Reich, this was meant to wipe out the entire Haywood bloodline. Nathan was infected by the metal blood that came from one of those foes, and for reasons that were never really explained, Nathan's body absorbed the metal, and in addition to him growing back a new leg, it made him a superhuman. With his newfound super strength and invincibility, Haywood fights crime under the name Citizen Steel. However, there are aspects of his power that are completely out of his control. Because of his steel-like skin, he's completely lost the ability to feel physical touch, which prevents him from gauging temperature or pain, and he can't control how strong he is, and I mean at all. There are times where his footsteps will be so heavy and powerful that the floor will break underneath him. To try and counteract this, he wears a special suit that mitigates his movements, but it can really only do so much. First appearing in Justice Society of America Volume 3 #2 back in 2007, check him out to see how truly strong he can be. Number 7. Scarlet Witch. The twin sister of Pietro Maximoff, Wanda Maximoff has always had trouble keeping her powers under control. With the ability to manipulate and warp reality at will with a force she refers to as chaos magic, which was given to her by High Evolutionary's experimentation and then further amplified by the demon that was imprisoned in Wundagore Mountain, her powers are really easy to lose control of, especially when her emotions are out of control. A 2004 storyline is a great example of this when she discovered that her twin sons weren't real. They were actually just manifestations of her reality-altering chaos magic, and she was unable to accept this and soon became a danger to herself and others, so her memories of the boys were completely wiped from her memory. Years later, she began to remember them, and when she realized what had been done to her, she went completely mad with grief. Her nervous breakdown gave way to a full-on war waged against the Avengers that resulted in several deaths, and the team's complete upheaval, and all the destruction and death came from her tampering with the fabric of reality. Later on, she causes M-Day, the depowering of the mutant race that nearly caused their extinction. Moral of the story? You really don't want to get on her bad side because you have no idea what she's gonna do. Check her out for yourself on the big screen in all the Avengers movies, or in her first appearance, 1964's X-Men number 4. Number 6, Ghost Rider. Don't worry, I won't be referencing the movie starring Nicolas Cage as Johnny Blaze because if you sat through them like I did, I think you've suffered enough. Now, Ghost Rider's powers come from his black magic bond to the demon Zarathos, and he's always been a thorn in Johnny's side for decades. Thanks to this connection, Blaze gained the ability to transform into Ghost Rider, who possesses a vast array of powers ranging from hellfire manipulation to superhuman stamina. Similar to Bruce Banner, Blaze had very little influence on Rider's actions in the beginning, succumbing to Zarathos' control anytime evil presented itself. Over time, he gradually gained more control over his alter ego, using his powers to not only vanquish baddies, but to protect the innocent. Zarathos resurfaced several times over the years with various schemes to regain control of Johnny Blaze's physical body. At times, he's been successful, causing Blaze to once again lose himself to the Rider, but usually Blaze manages to come out on top and regain control. Take a look at his first appearance all the way back in 1972 in Marvel Spotlight number 5. Number 5, New 52 Superman. We all know our Prime Earth's Clark Kent. So let's take a look at another version of the superhero that didn't stick around for too long. Now, possessing many of the same powers, there are many things that led to this demise of this version of Superman. One being the use of a new power he dubbed the Solar Flare. This power released a massive blast from his body, using every last bit of solar energy stored in his cells. The devastating power alone made this ability a very useful one, but it left Clark powerless for 24 hours after each use, because his body needed time to reabsorb the sunlight. After repeated use, Superman found himself less and less super, losing his powers one by one. Fast forward past a few fights and a pretty bad kryptonite infection, and we find Superman needing to use this ability one last time, and it really was the last. Our New 52 Superman is finished off for good, and if it weren't for the pre-New 52 Superman finding his way to this universe, there would have been no one to protect it. Check out the storyline for yourself and let me know in the comments what you think. Number 4, Raven. In the comics, Raven's powers weren't always clearly defined, and neither was her control over them, which is why we'll be focusing on the Raven that we saw in 2003's Teen Titans TV series. Born the daughter of the demon Trigon and the human Orella, Raven was primarily raised by monks and was taught to use her powers and abilities, as well as learn to keep her emotions in check. Now, upon learning that one day she would be used as a key element in her father's eventual takeover of the universe, she ends up fleeing to Earth, hoping to escape the fate where she eventually joins the Teen Titans. In the cartoon, it's clearly stated that her powers are dependent on her emotions, so the reason she acts so cold is to keep her abilities in check. But despite her attempts, Raven is still human, well, half human, I guess, and her emotions get the better of her a few times in the series. In the episode Fear itself, when, after watching a scary movie, Raven's fears were manifested as a real beast that haunted the Titans' towers, and in the episode Switched, we learn of the connection between Raven's powers and her emotions when Starfire, in Raven's body, causes havoc in her chaotic emotions. Now, it really makes sense why Raven meditated so much throughout the series, and man, do I miss that show. If you haven't watched it, please do yourself a favor and find it on the internet. You will not regret it. Number 3, Friendly Fire. Now, little is known about this DC Comics character, other than that he's not the best hero. With the ability to shoot blasts of fire and energy from his hands, you'd think that he would have learned to aim early on, but alas, he seemed to have skipped that step. He was a terrible shot, so he consistently hit his friends and not the villains, making the name Friendly Fire make sense. Once a member of the hero team Section 8, which was basically a big old group of losers. I mean, come on, their members consisted of a guy who carried around a window to throw at people and another guy who welded dead dogs to villains. He kind of looked like a superstar compared to those guys. His final adventure was probably the worst out of all of them because instead of hitting the villain with his powers, he ends up blowing his own head. Check out this tragic yet hilarious story for yourself in 1997's Hitman number 18. Number 2, Franklin Richards. Known as Powerhouse, Franklin Richards is the son of Reed and Susan Richards, and we've all learned by now, being the child of two mutants usually leads to some crazy strong powers that are impossible to control. Considered an Omega level mutant, Richards possesses a ridiculous number of powers which earned him the title of the most powerful mutant ever born. Because Franklin's powers manifested at a young age rather than during puberty, as with most mutants, his control over his abilities wasn't always that great. In fact, Franklin once defeated Ultron when he accidentally released a wave of psionic energy as a result of Ultron's radiation. He also once resurrected Galactus, created a villain known as Modulus when he felt jealous of his newborn sister, and even transformed Ben Grimm back into the Thing to rescue him from an Asgardian warrior. This kid is truly not someone you want to mess with. Why not check out his story for yourself through his first appearance in 1968's Fantastic Four Annual number 6. And number 1, so many of the X-Men. Now, this one had to be combined into one point because my goodness, there are so many X-Men who have trouble controlling their powers. Here, let me give you a few examples. Cyclops can't control his optic blast without the help of his specifically made visor. Beast keeps mutating into various furry forms. Wolverine's lost his healing factor countless times and has even died because of it. If Rogue touches anyone, she involuntarily takes their powers and even their lives if the connection isn't prolonged. Meryl once lost the ability to control her excessive bone growth. Hot-headed Chamber has basically no lower jaw or much of a neck thanks to the energy blasts that emanate from his head, and Legion barely has any control over any of his abilities. Now, obviously this all makes sense since the nature of a mutation would obviously have its drawbacks, but seriously, when you list it all like this, it seems a little bit excessive.